I never imagined a single sentence could shatter the ground beneath my feet, but it happened the moment my daughter snapped, her voice slicing through the room like a blade. Humiliation settled over me so sharply it felt physical, the kind of wound that does not bleed on the outside, but tears something loose on the inside. In that instant, I understood that betrayal does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it walks in wearing the face you once carried in your arms. And that was the moment everything, absolutely everything, began to change. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. My name is Margaret Collins, though most people in Sausalito simply call me Maggie. At 68 years old, I have settled into a quiet rhythm aboard my little houseboat tucked along the marina. Life here moves gently, almost in slow motion, beginning each morning with a curtain of fog rolling across Richardson Bay and the soft tap of sailboat masts knocking against their lines. I often wake before sunrise, brew a cup of Earl Grey tea, and sit on the narrow deck to watch the water ripple in pale silver streaks. This floating home, modest and slightly weathered, has been my sanctuary for 5 years, ever since my husband, Tom Collins, passed away from heart failure. His absence left a hollow place in me that no amount of time has fully sealed, but the water has a way of soothing even the most persistent ache. Before retirement, I spent 3 decades working as the administrative manager of a public high school in San Francisco. The job was steady rather than glamorous, filled with paperwork, scheduling, and the small but constant fires that ignite in a school office. It was not a career that earned admiration in glossy magazines, yet it allowed me to build a simple life with Tom. We raised our daughter, Lily Collins, in a modest home not far from the Golden Gate Bridge. Tom would bring flowers every Friday, even when money was tight, and Lily would run around the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Those were the years when life felt solid, predictable, and warm. Now, the echo of those memories keeps me company on quiet evenings. I am a person of gentle habits, tending to potted daffodils, sweeping the deck, writing longhand letters to friends who still cherish the feel of paper. I have never needed luxury. A good book, a kettle of hot water, and the chorus of gulls overhead have always been enough. Yet beneath that contentment lives a longing that rises more often than I admit. I miss the closeness I once shared with Lily. She is 35 now, a successful attorney at a law firm in downtown San Francisco. Her world moves fast, filled with deadlines, lunch meetings, and elegant social events that seem galaxies away from my wooden walkway and tide charts. When she visits, which is not often, she stays just long enough to finish a cup of tea before rushing back across the bridge. Lily married into the Hart family, a name that carries weight in Sonoma Valley. Her husband, Ethan Hart, is the heir to Hart Estate, a sprawling vineyard and winery that hosts private tastings, charity galas, and wine critics who speak in poetic tones about tannins and aroma profiles. Ethan's mother, Veronica Hart, is the embodiment of refinement, always draped in silk and pearls, with a manner of speaking that suggests she is accustomed to being admired. Each time I have attended an event at Hart Estate, I have felt more like an observer than a participant, as if I stepped into someone else's world and dared not touch anything. Still, I hoped that Lily's marriage would draw us closer, not push us into different orbits. So when she called one warm afternoon to invite me to a special dinner at the estate, I felt a flicker of excitement. Opportunities to be part of her life, even briefly, are rare. I pressed the phone to my chest after we hung up, letting the moment settle. I did not know it then, but that simple invitation would begin a chain of events that would shake the fragile balance of my relationship with my daughter and pull me into a world I never imagined I would enter. If you're still watching and this moment hit you as hard as it hit me, comment number 1 below so I know you're still with me. Now let's move on to chapter 2. The afternoon sun hung low when I began getting ready for the dinner at Hart Estate. Even though Lily had said it was a formal gathering, I knew I did not own anything close to what women in her social circle usually wore. I opened my small wooden wardrobe and ran my fingers across the limited choices, finally settling on the navy dress that Tom once said made me look elegant. I paired it with the soft wool scarf I had knitted last winter. The mirror on the houseboat was small, slightly warped from age, but it showed enough for me to smooth my hair, adjust the neckline, and hope that I looked presentable. Beneath the motions, however, my stomach fluttered with a vague unease I could not name. As I drove toward Sonoma Valley, the scenery shifted from coastal mist to golden sunlight spilling across the vineyards. Hart Estate rose at the end of a long, paved driveway lined with lanterns and manicured olive trees. The grand entrance alone felt like a threshold between two worlds. Guests stepped out of polished cars in tailored outfits that glimmered under the warm lights. Servers moved quickly and silently, arranging trays of wine glasses with the precision of a choreographed performance. I paused for a moment near my car, absorbing the contrast between my modest life on the water and the grandeur surrounding me. Lily approached, elegant in a fitted dress, her hair swept back in a style that made her look older and more polished than her 35 years. She greeted me with a quick embrace, but almost immediately, her hands went to my scarf, adjusting and smoothing it with a nervous energy that revealed more than words ever could. She reminded me gently to keep conversations simple tonight. I felt the faint sting of that suggestion, though she said it as if offering helpful advice rather than a barrier meant to keep me from embarrassing her. Veronica Hart soon joined us, every step of hers measured and graceful. She wore a deep emerald dress that shimmered under the string lights and carried herself with the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to admiration. Her greeting was polite, even warm at first glance, yet her eyes moved over me with a quiet scrutiny that left the air colder. I had known from the beginning that Veronica viewed the world through a hierarchy she never needed to say aloud. Standing beside her felt like standing under a spotlight designed to magnify every flaw. A moment later, the restaurant manager approached Lily with a clipboard, asking about the seating arrangement. I stood nearby and heard the phrase, "main table," spoken with a tone that implied significance. The table, apparently, was reserved for the influential guests of the evening, investors, critics, and, of course, the Harts. Lily hesitated when the conversation reached the question of where I should sit. Her glance flicked toward me, then toward Veronica, then toward Ethan in the distance. Something unspoken tightened her expression. I tried to lighten the mood by saying that I could sit anywhere, but the comment drifted into silence without acknowledgement. The unease inside me grew heavier. It felt as though I had stepped into an exam I never prepared for, one where every gesture could be judged. As I followed the group into the dining hall, the lighting softened to warm gold, reflecting off rows of crystal glasses. The room felt both beautiful and suffocating. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet warning stirred. I sensed that tonight would not be just another formal dinner. Something was coming. Something that would shift the fragile balance I had tried so hard to keep. If you're still here and this turning point made you feel something, comment number 2 below to let me know you're following every step. Now, let's move on to chapter 3. I remember the way the light in the Hart Estate dining room seemed almost too bright the moment I stepped inside, as if it were designed to expose every flaw a person might try to hide. The long banquet table stretched across the room like a runway of polished mahogany, draped in white linen so crisp it looked untouched by human hands. Silver chargers reflected the chandelier light in a way that made the whole scene shimmer. Around me, guests dressed in elegant evening wear lifted crystal glasses, their conversations flowing easily as though everyone belonged here except me. I tried to steady my breathing, hoping no one noticed how out of place I felt. I scanned the table and saw an empty chair beside Veronica, perfectly aligned like it had been waiting for someone. No one stopped me, and even the event coordinator simply brushed past as if my presence was expected. I allowed myself to think for a moment that perhaps I was not entirely unwelcome. I pulled the chair gently, trying not to scrape it against the floor, and lowered myself into it with a polite smile that I hoped looked natural. My hands remained folded tightly in my lap as I tried to blend into the background. That fragile illusion shattered the moment Lily's voice cut through the room. It was sharp, loud, and filled with the kind of outrage that leaves no room for misunderstanding. She stood across from me, her eyes blazing in disbelief. Her words struck with the force of a slap, and her voice carried far beyond the cluster of people around us. The entire table fell silent, as though someone had pressed a mute button. I felt the heat rise up my neck, then spread across my face until the humiliation was a physical burn. Ethan stood beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes down in a way that suggested agreement rather than discomfort. Veronica's expression hardened just slightly, but she did nothing to soften the moment. A few of the guests exchanged glances, some pitying, some merely curious, but none intervened. Their silence wrapped around me like another layer of shame. I rose from the chair with stiff movements, trying to keep my dignity intact even as it slipped through me like water. I murmured something about not wanting to take the wrong seat, though my voice was barely steady. I stepped away from the table while the weight of countless eyes clung to my back. The hallway outside felt colder, quieter, and harsher than I expected. By the time I reached the stone patio near the parking area, my hands trembled. The night air smelled faintly of grapes and earth, the scent that usually comforted me whenever I visited Sonoma. Tonight, it only made me feel more alone. I leaned against the cool stone wall, pressing my palm flat against its surface as though anchoring myself. My thoughts swirled painfully as I tried to understand how Lily, the daughter I once read bedtime stories to, had become someone who would publicly push me aside to impress others. The sting of it settled deep in my chest, like something breaking quietly. I stood there long enough for the sounds of the party to fade into a distant hum. Just when I thought I could not bear another moment of that hollow emptiness, a voice behind me spoke my full name with careful precision. I turned, startled, and found an older man watching me with a mix of recognition and purpose. His presence felt strangely deliberate, as though he had been searching for me. The night held its breath, as I wondered why he knew my name, and why he had appeared at the exact moment my world seemed to tilt. If you're still watching, and the tension is pulling you in deeper, comment number 3 below so I know you're staying with the story. Now let's continue to chapter 4. When I left the Hart estate that night, the crisp Napa Valley air felt heavier than usual, as though it carried the weight of every word Lily had thrown at me across that elegant dining room. I walked to my car slowly, my legs stiff, my chest tight. The vineyard stretched into the distance under the fading light, rows of green dissolving into twilight. Normally the sight calmed me. That evening it only reminded me how small I felt. I sat behind the wheel for several quiet minutes, gripping the steering wheel as if it could steady the painful swirl inside me. I kept replaying the moment Lily pointed at me in front of her new family, reducing me to someone unworthy of a seat at their table. No matter how many times I inhaled deeply, the sting returned with the same force. Before driving home, I glanced back at the stone walkway where Martin Delgado had spoken my name earlier. His voice had been calm, almost too deliberate for a stranger. He had recognized me instantly and hinted at matters related to the Hart family, matters I had never heard of. I considered calling after him, but humiliation had pushed me into silence. Now that I was alone, I wondered why a man like that would know anything about my daughter's in-laws and why he had appeared at the exact moment everything fell apart. The thought unsettled me enough that I put the car in gear without thinking further. When I reached my small house on Elmwood Drive, I could not bring myself to go inside right away. Instead, I stood at the walkway, staring at the porch light glowing like an old friend. Eventually, I forced myself to enter, and as soon as I set my keys on the counter, I reached for my phone. I typed a message to Lily, keeping it gentle, telling her that I hoped she was safe and that I had not meant to cause discomfort. Her reply arrived a minute later. It was short, cold, and formal. There was no warmth, no daughter in it. Seeing her name on my screen without any sign of affection felt like another blow. I called her immediately, but the call was declined before the second ring. In a moment of desperate hope, I tried Ethan. He answered, but his tone held no sincerity. He spoke vaguely, insisting that my presence near the head of the table had put everyone in an awkward position. He claimed he was busy and ended the call quickly. His clipped dismissal suggested that the decision to humiliate me had been discussed beforehand, a coordinated effort rather than a moment of impulse. The thought hollowed me. Later that night, I sat in my living room, replaying the past 2 years. I remembered how often Lily had canceled plans, always saying the Hart family needed her. I realized how her laughter had changed, how her visits had grown shorter, how she had begun speaking of Veronica with a reverence she had never shown to me. I had ignored the signs, believing Lily was simply adjusting to marriage. Now those details weighed heavily, forming a pattern I wished I had noticed sooner. A knock pulled me from my thoughts. It was Joyce, my neighbor for nearly 2 decades, holding a small tin of lavender tea. She must have seen me arrive earlier in visible distress. Without asking questions, she sat on the couch beside me, her presence steady. When I finally told her what happened, she listened intently. She reminded me that sudden changes in a person often come from outside influence, not from within. She mentioned that the Hart family had a reputation for being controlling, especially toward anyone who married into their circle. Her words struck deeper than she knew, matching the unease Martin had stirred. By the time Joyce left, I felt a quiet resolve building beneath the ache. I was not willing to lose my daughter to a world that treated her like property and me like an inconvenience. I opened my laptop and searched the Hart family history, their vineyards, their business ventures, and almost immediately discovered unsettling gaps that supported Martin's warning. When my phone rang near midnight and I saw Martin's name appear, I knew my instincts had been right. He told me he had documents I needed to see. His voice was calm, but the implication was clear. This was only the beginning. If you're still here and this twist caught your attention, comment number 4 below to show you're sticking with me. Now, let's head into Chapter 5. The morning after the disastrous dinner at Hart Estate, I drove to a small cafe tucked between an antique shop and a florist in downtown Napa Valley. The sun had barely risen, but the place was already humming softly with the clinking of mugs and the low hum of conversation. I chose a table near the window, wanting the comfort of natural light in case the uneasy feeling in my chest returned. When Martin Delgado walked through the door carrying a thick set of documents tied with a faded cord, the atmosphere shifted. He moved with the steady caution of someone who had learned to navigate dangerous situations. He sat across from me without any hesitation, placing the bundle carefully between us like an object that required delicate handling. His eyes held the seriousness of a man who had been carrying a burden alone for far too long. As soon as he began speaking, I understood that his appearance at the estate the previous night had not been random. He told me he had spent years working inside Hart and Crest Vineyard as a senior financial officer until he was forced out after uncovering suspicious transactions buried deep in the company's books. Hearing the urgency in his voice made my pulse quicken. He pushed the documents toward me, and as I untied the cord, my hands trembled. Inside were copies of bank statements, loan agreements, and a series of internal memos referencing adjustments that were anything but innocent. Martin explained that the Hart family had been hiding significant debt tied to a failed land investment. The numbers were staggering. Millions siphoned through shell accounts, masked and round under revised financial reports. The more I looked, the clearer it became that this was more than carelessness. It was a pattern of deliberate deceit. The worst part was what Martin said next. He told me that Veronica and Ethan had slowly begun shifting responsibility onto Lily under the guise of giving her leadership opportunities. They needed someone with a clean record and a public image rooted in normalcy to bear certain legal signatures if the fraud ever surfaced. The realization struck like a physical blow. My daughter was being groomed to take the fall for scandals she had no knowledge of. The humiliation I endured at dinner was not personal disdain alone. It was the Hart family insulating themselves by stripping Lily of any outside ties. Then came the twist that made my stomach turn. The elegant dinner had not been a simple family gathering, but a discreet negotiation with a potential investor who believed the Hart family represented stability. Veronica had insisted on an image of flawless unity. My arrival had threatened that facade, and Lily's reaction had been shaped by pressure far deeper than embarrassment. I saw Lily in my mind, the child who once clung to my shoulders when she was frightened, now maneuvered into a puppet role. Martin leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. He admitted he had gathered evidence for years but lacked the power to use it. He believed I was the missing piece because Lily had not yet been legally bound to any fraudulent agreements. The burden of this knowledge pressed on my shoulders. I looked out the window at the soft glow of morning spreading across the rooftops and felt something inside me shift. Anger, fear, and heartbreak swirled together until they fused into a single force. Resolve. I closed the folder, gripping it firmly, and met Martin's gaze with a clarity I had not felt in years. I promised him I would review every page. More importantly, I promised I would protect my daughter from being dragged into a storm she never created. As we stood to leave, the reality settled like the weight of a door closing behind me. Another door, full of danger and possibility, had opened ahead. I knew I would walk through it, because reclaiming Lily's life depended on it. When I left the cafe with the Martins' documents tucked under my arm, the morning sun felt sharper than usual, as if every beam carried new judgment. I drove home in silence, the tires humming against the pavement while my thoughts churned restlessly. Every revelation Martin shared echoed in my mind, colliding with the memory of Lily pushing me aside at the dinner table. The deeper I sank into thought, the more I realized the weight of the decision forming ahead of me. Saving Lily would mean stepping into a world of manipulation, money, and deceit that I had never touched before. At home, I set the stack of papers on my small desk, the same one Lily once used for school assignments. For a long moment, I simply stared at the bundle, feeling both fear and obligation. When I finally loosened the cord and spread the pages out, the truth unfolded in harsh, structured paragraphs. I saw references to hidden debts and misdirected funds. Then, like a punch to the chest, I saw Lily's name embedded in several internal memos discussing future liability transition. My breath caught. My daughter, unknowingly positioned as a shield for her husband's family. I read until my eyes stung. Each document revealed another layer of risk she had never agreed to, all carefully arranged beneath the polished image of the Hart family. As I pieced together the pattern, the room seemed to close in around me. Lily had been drifting away from me, reshaped by Veronica's influence, guided step by step into a role designed to protect everyone but herself. The thought of losing her not emotionally, but legally or financially, made my stomach twist. I was still staring at the papers when my phone vibrated. Ethan's name lit up the screen. His message was short, stiff, and full of implied threat. It warned me to respect boundaries going forward after my disruption at the dinner. He did not have to use sharp words for me to hear them. The message told me everything. He wanted me out of Lily's life entirely. The timing made it clear he feared something, and fear meant danger. As if to confirm that danger, a new message arrived moments later, this time from an unexpected Heart and Crest Vineyard corporate address. It looked like an automated internal forward, but what it contained made the blood drain from my face. It was a planning memo listing several individuals under a category labeled Risk Absorption Framework. Lily's name appeared next to a deadline tied to an upcoming financial inspection. This was no theory. They were preparing to push responsibility onto her imminently. My hands trembled, but beneath the trembling, a resolve began to rise. I paced the room, weighing every option. Telling Lily immediately risked her disbelief. Facing Veronica and Ethan openly would almost certainly backfire. The only viable path was the one I feared most, working in secret with Martin, collecting enough evidence to protect Lily before she ever realized how close she had come to danger. By sunset, the choice was carved into me. I gathered the documents into a neat stack and placed them inside a drawer, locking it with a decisive click. Through the window, the vineyard behind my home glowed beneath the warm evening light, reminding me of a time when life felt simple and Lily's future seemed untouchable. Now, reclaiming that safety meant stepping into the shadows first. I whispered a quiet promise to myself. I would fight for her, even if she never knew how close she came to losing everything. If you're still watching, and the choice in this chapter shook you even a little, comment number 6 below to let me know you're still here. Now let's step into Chapter 7. In the days following my decision to work quietly with Martin, the air around my home felt different, as though the walls themselves sensed the weight of what I had stepped into. Even simple routines carried a new tension. When I brewed my morning coffee, the house seemed unusually still, as if listening for what would come next. Each hour carried the unease of someone who had chosen a path without knowing where it would lead. I told myself it was worth it, that protecting Lily mattered more than any discomfort, yet the heaviness settled deeper each day. Lily called after nearly a week, but the moment I heard her voice, I realized how far she had drifted from me. She spoke as if reading a prepared script, polite yet distant, careful to avoid warmth. Gone were the small remarks she used to share, the updates about her day, the gentle teasing that once bridged the space between us. She told me she was busy and just wanted to check in. Before I could ask anything meaningful, she ended the call abruptly. When the line went dead, the emptiness in the room swelled. I understood then that my silence, though necessary, was pushing her further away. Soon after, Ethan's influence made itself known again. I received an email from him, polished and professional on the surface. It expressed concern about potential misunderstandings and urged me to keep a respectful distance to avoid creating pressure for Lily during a sensitive time. Every sentence was crafted to appear considerate, yet every word felt like a warning wrapped in courtesy. He did not say anything directly threatening, but the message carried a cold intention. It made clear he wanted me removed from Lily's world entirely. As I read the email, a knot tightened in my stomach. I was caught between the need to protect my daughter and the fear that she was slipping out of reach. The guilt grew heavier. I replayed memories of Lily when she was younger, how she used to run into my arms at the end of a school day, certain that I could solve any problem she faced. Now I was hiding the truth from her, afraid she might reject it. The struggle between protecting her and wanting her trust tore at me in quiet, persistent waves. Strange signs began appearing around me. A dark car I did not recognize parked near my home several evenings in a row. When I mailed a set of documents to Martin, the delivery was unexpectedly delayed, and the postal office told me the routing had been flagged for verification. Even a small package of records Martin sent to me arrived with the seal slightly disturbed. These were subtle hints, but together they pointed to one conclusion. The Hart family had begun paying attention. Then Martin contacted me again, sharing urgent news. He explained that new documents showed Ethan had initiated the process of transferring partial liability to Lily under a temporary authorization agreement. If she signed anything, even casually, she could be legally trapped. The thought sent a jolt through me. Time was no longer on my side. Every day Lily stayed in that house was another day she edged closer to irreversible danger. That night, I sat alone in my dim living room, the glow from an old lamp casting soft shadows on framed photos of Lily from her childhood. I picked up one where she was smiling in a bright blue dress, her hand gripping mine. I traced the edge of the frame, feeling the ache settle deeper. The consequences of my silence were real, and so were the risks of speaking too soon. But as I closed the folder of evidence and held it tightly, a steady resolve took shape. Whatever the cost, I would not abandon her to the world the Hart family had built. The consequences were already unfolding, but retreat was no longer an option. In the quiet hours of the next morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the stack of documents that had come to define every thought I carried. The weight of what was unfolding pressed heavily on me. I realized that simply collecting information would no longer be enough. Each day that passed tightened the noose around Lily, and if I remained a silent observer, she would soon be pushed into signing away her future. That truth settled into me with a cold clarity. I needed a real solution, not just evidence. I contacted Martin and arranged to meet him in a place where no one would think to look for us. We chose the public library, a quiet corner room tucked between rows of old history books. He arrived with his usual serious expression, carrying a small notebook filled with updates. The financial inspection he had warned me about was approaching faster than either of us anticipated. Only a few weeks remained before the Hart family would be forced to restructure their liabilities, and Lily was at the top of their list of convenient shields. The urgency in Martin's voice steeled my resolve. Still, fear crept into my thoughts. Taking action meant involving people outside our small circle. It meant building a defense Lily did not yet know she needed. I worried she would see my efforts as interference, or worse, betrayal. But each time doubt rose, I remembered the trust she once placed in me so naturally when she was a child, and I knew I could not let fear dictate the next steps. I began calling law offices that specialized in corporate manipulation and abuse of influence. After several discouraging conversations, I found an attorney whose background matched exactly what Lily needed. Her name was Rebecca Logan, a woman known for her expertise in protecting individuals caught in the crosshairs of powerful family enterprises. When we met, she listened with a calm understanding that eased some of the tension inside me. By the end of the appointment, she had laid out a plan that offered the first real hope I had felt in weeks. Rebecca explained that we needed to formally document Lily's lack of knowledge, prevent her from signing any agreements related to Hart and Crest Vineyard, and prepare a strategy to separate her legally and physically from the Hart household if matters escalated. Her confidence brought a sense of direction I had desperately needed. That afternoon, as I drove home, my phone rang. Lily's voice sounded strained, soft, and unsure. She told me things at home felt increasingly tense, though she did not elaborate. It was the first hint that she sensed something wrong in the world she had been folded into. I listened closely, careful not to push too far, grateful for this small crack in the walls around her. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my living room with Rebecca's notes spread before me. For the first time, I felt that I was not merely reacting, but choosing a path forward. I gathered the papers neatly and placed them where I could reach them quickly when the moment arrived. Outside, the sky dimmed into a muted gray, and I knew the time was coming to pull Lily out of the trap closing around her. If you're still with me and this turning point made your heart tighten, comment number 8 below so I know you're ready for the ending. Now, let's move on to the final chapters. By the time Martin and Rebecca confirmed that the transfer of liability had reached its final stage, a deep steadiness settled over me. The Hart family was preparing to push Lily into signing the temporary authorization documents, and once her name touched those pages, everything we had fought for would be meaningless. I felt the urgency rise like a tide, sweeping away every remaining hesitation. There was no more time to wait, no more time to strategize from a distance. I had to reach her before the damage became permanent. I drove to Hart Estate with a clarity that surprised me. The guard at the gate hesitated when he recognized me, clearly instructed to keep me out, but eventually allowed me through with visible reluctance. As I walked toward the main house, the grandeur of the estate seemed colder than ever, its walls hiding secrets that had nearly swallowed my daughter whole. Inside, I followed the muffled voices to a private meeting room where Lily sat before a neat stack of documents, her expression drained and weary. Ethan and Veronica turned toward me with fury when I stepped inside, but I felt no fear. Instead, I placed the folder of evidence on the table with a steady hand. The shift in the room was immediate. Lily looked at the documents, then at me, confusion clouding her features. She reached for the papers as I explained what they contained. Although I kept my words measured, the truth echoed loudly through the room. The evidence spoke for itself. Slowly, Lily's face changed. Shock, disbelief, then dawning recognition moved through her like shadows. She saw the pattern, the manipulation, the way she had been pushed into a position she never agreed to. Ethan's anger flared, and Veronica's composure cracked under the weight of what the documents revealed. Their plans unraveled in an instant. Lily pushed the authorization packet away, her refusal quiet but absolute. In that moment, something between us mended. She moved to stand beside me, choosing the truth over the illusions she had been living under. Rebecca arrived soon after to secure the next steps, but the battle had already been won. As Lily and I walked out of Hart Estate together, the evening air felt lighter. For the first time in a long while, she held on to me, and I knew we were finally stepping into a future free from the shadows behind us. The days after we walked out of Hart Estate settled over us like a soft fog, quiet but strangely comforting. Lily stayed with me while she tried to rebuild her balance, and for the first time in years, the house felt warm again. Each morning she drifted into the kitchen with tired eyes but a steadier breath, and I could sense how the distance between us slowly closed. She ate without rushing, lingered near the window, and let herself be human again, after months of living as if every move were monitored. While Lily recovered, Attorney Rebecca handled the legal knots that once threatened to trap her. I watched the confusion ripple through the Hart household from afar, but I did not seek revenge. Peace, I realized, was its own form of justice. Lily spent evenings sorting through memories she had ignored for too long, admitting how deeply she had been controlled and how blind she had been to the subtle ways her confidence had been stripped away. She spoke quietly one night, saying, "I am sorry, Dad." The words were soft, almost hesitant, but they carried the weight of everything we had endured. I learned something too. Love cannot survive on silence alone. There are moments when a father must step forward, even if it risks losing the person he is trying to protect. As if to mark the closing of one chapter, Martin sent a brief message. She is safe now, the rest is on me. It was not a threat, just a reminder that some battles would continue beyond our sight. Lily and I ended the week sitting on the porch at sunset, her hand resting lightly on mine, a quiet promise that we had found our way back to each other at last. There are moments in life when the ground beneath us shifts, not because the world has changed, but because we finally see it clearly. Healing rarely arrives all at once. It comes in small reconciliations, quiet realizations, and the courage to step away from what once kept us bound. Sometimes the greatest victories are not loud or dramatic. They are the quiet choices to reclaim dignity, rebuild trust, and walk forward with a steadier heart. Life has a way of returning us to what matters when we are brave enough to listen. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it resonated with you, I would truly appreciate hearing your thoughts. Feel free to share a comment, follow the page, and subscribe so you never miss another chapter. Your support means more than you know, and I am grateful to have you here.